probably only need about one plant. Malabar spinach is actually a true perennial if you grow it in the tropics, but it's a super frost-sensitive plant. If you grow it around here, you can grow it as an annual. A cool thing about it is it will seed the first year. So we allow the plant to seed, it drops the seed down, and then the following year it will reseed itself. So even though it's a true perennial, around here it grows like an annual. But if we allow it to self-seed itself, it grows like an annual that we only have to plant once and it will feed us for life. You can eat the leaves when raw. They have a bit of a mucilaginous texture to them, but it's not off-putting. It has like a more earthy flavor than some of your other greens, but I like that flavor. If you want, you could add them to a salad. I wouldn't make a whole salad out of them, but they're a nice addition. Or you can even cook them and use them like you would a lot of other common greens and just put them in like stir fries and stuff. They're also packed with nutrition, which is a nice thing, and they have high levels of vitamin A, C, and E. Overall, it's a dynamic plant, and it's a really good idea to even juice these greens to make a nice, healthy green juice packed with a lot of nutrition and not a bad flavor either. Another bonus is it's a beautiful plant, and it's grown as an ornamental sometimes, but we're just growing it for its edible properties. As time has gone on, I have
If you're a woman weighing over 180 pounds, you need to try this. I was 183 and I got down to 152 just this week. The best part is that it's super easy and all you have to do is
fallen more in love with these elevated raised beds. They're so convenient to grow in. I designed these in tandem with Vego, and it's exactly what I've always wanted. It's great in a garden space like you see here, but it's also perfect for a patio. So it's fantastic in all different locations, and it's convenient to only have to fill your bed up about 12 inches instead of filling the whole entire bottom with just filler soil and stuff, or maybe even heavy logs. When it comes down to it, I love growing in these beds, and they're in stock now, but I promise you they won't last long because these things, they're selling super fast. Grab one now over at teamgrow.us. The next annual that will feed you for life are brassicas. The genus of brassicas encompasses a wide range of plants. When it comes to some of them, like cabbage, cauliflower, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, these are not annuals that would be a good idea to allow to reseed, because when it comes to those, we actually have to harvest the head of those before they flower. But brassicas like mustard greens, arugula, and kale are ones that we can allow to reseed. This way we only have to plant them one time. When it comes to reseeding themselves, there are a few important things we need to take into account. The first one is that we only want to allow one species of each kind of brassica to reseed itself. This way, it won't cross-pollinate with another one. Let me give you an example. Last year, I grew the wasabina leaf mustard in this bed right next to me, and then in a bed just a few feet away, I grew the Japanese red mustard. These are both mustard greens. They are the same species, but different varieties. If I allow both of them to flower, they could cross-pollinate with one another, and then the offspring would be a combination of the two of them. That's not what we want. If I remove the Japanese red mustard green and only allow the wasabina leaf mustard to flower, then when that reseeds itself, I'll have the wasabina leaf mustard as that offspring. The only thing is, I want to make sure I only let a few of them grow, because some of these brassicas really like to reseed themselves a lot. When it comes to brassicas like arugula, they are a different species than mustard greens. So as long as you only allow one variety of arugula to flower, then you could allow that to self-seed and have the same arugula every single year. The same goes with kale, even though kale is a biennial. If you grow a variety like the red Russian kale or the white Russian kale, they're super cold hardy, and some of them can grow through the whole winter, even here in zone 7A. In the spring, if they're still growing, then those will flower, and they're a different species than arugula or mustard greens. So as long as you allow only one variety of kale to seed, it will keep reseeding itself and keep coming back. The fifth annual that will feed you for life is lettuce. Have you ever grown lettuce? It looks fantastic. Then the summer heat comes and it starts to get like a little bit taller and a stalk starts to form. That's because your lettuce is starting to flower and go to seed. Most people just yank that out, but if you allow it to go to flower, then it will produce seed and drop that seed down. Lettuce is primarily self-pollinating, which is great because it won't easily cross-pollinate with other lettuces. This way, you can allow multiple varieties of lettuces to self-seed themselves. When it comes to reseeding and germination in general, lettuce likes relatively cool temperatures, so about 60 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit. If you allow your spring lettuce to flower and then drop its seed down, your seed most likely won't sprout in the summer because it's just a little too warm, the temperature of the soil. But come fall, when the temperature of the soil drops down a little bit into like say the 60s or 70s, then your lettuce will sprout. Additionally, if you allow your lettuce to self-seed in the fall, then come spring, when the temperature of the soil heats up to that right temperature, then your lettuce will sprout up. If you want to try your hand at growing annuals as perennials, it's important to make sure that the annuals you're trying to allow to self-seed are open-pollinated or heirloom varieties. This way, if you plant something like the tango lettuce, you know you're going to be getting the tango lettuce back. I thought a video like this would be a high-value video because I want people to kind of look at gardening from a different perspective. Just because something says it's an annual doesn't mean you have to grow it as an annual. You can kind of form it to grow as a perennial. Bill Mollison, one of my all-time favorite growers and someone that I looked up to, said something that I thought was really cool. He talked about seeing different opportunities in the garden. He said you can be in a room and there's two doors, and then all of a sudden you open one door, and when you go into that room, you realize that that room's filled with all other doors. So there's so many different opportunities and there's so many different possibilities. So when we look at gardening from a different perspective, it could add a lot of value to us. And the opposite is also true. We could take a plant that's a perennial and grow it as an annual if we want to. For instance, I've grown the moringa tree in the past just in a container. I grew it as an annual so I could eat those leaves, but around here it only grows as an annual because it dies through the winter. So even though it is a perennial, we can still get use of it by growing it as an annual. In reality, we do this all the time. Something like a pepper plant is actually more of a perennial. The only reason we grow it as an annual around here is because it dies over the winter. But if you want, you could take your peppers, overwinter them, and then grow them in the spring again. We don't want to get stuck in, again, these mindsets of that's just an annual, that's just a perennial. Like I mentioned before, there's so many different doors of opportunity that we can open if we just look at it from a different perspective. That's today's video, growers. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got something out of it. I had a blast out here. The weather is slowly starting to get nicer. With just a few tastes of these warm days, it just gets me so excited, it gets me amped. And I hope you guys are getting out there and making some of these early investments that will pay off in the near future and also in the distant future. I also want to mention a thank you to one of our new channel members, Dottie Moore. Thanks for being a part of Team Grow. Thanks for having your hand in everything we're doing out here. I also want to mention that you guys need to be part of the community of Team Grow. It's free to join. There are a number of different free resources. There's a lot of different members you can connect with. We can learn from each other. And I also have that seed starting course in there. If you haven't started your seeds yet, it's a tremendous amount of value. It can definitely help you, and it's super important to make sure we lay the right foundation. Having healthy seedlings will lead to big healthy plants and massive future harvests. And I mean, it's just, there's nothing like being out in the garden. So we encourage you to get out there, spend some time in the garden, soak up the sun, and just try to enjoy yourself as much as possible. I'll be back to you again with another one real soon. We out.
Wish your cleanser could do more? Switch to Garnier Micellar Cleansing Water. Removes makeup and impurities, zero residue. Michael's lowest prices of the season sale is going on now. Get up to 60% off thousands of items, including spring floral and decor. Score supplies for less with amazing deals on wall frames, canvas, and more. And all yarn is on sale. Shop today. Sale ends soon.
We lack the requisite materials. New unionism is our future. Us filings swept into an... Break's over.
I like the way you set out.
New orders? Ship under attack.
Attention for the Admiral.
Lies never really. You cannot appease me.
Flagship awaiting instructions.
It's rewarding to work within. I suggest working in straight lines.
Looks fair, but there's mould in the walls.
We're fed at least. When do we start again?
New orders? Steersman!
You reached a new milestone.
Flagship at your service.
You can't keep it a secret from. I had a feeling you'd do well.
Attention for the Admiral.
Ship under attack.
Ready as we can be. We'll give it our best.
Dead on me feet.
Every day a market day.
Damage notwithstanding, Admiral. Your words make me wonder. Are you the one the omen said would come?
Rah, 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 you big toff.
Like me, you do it for the populace.
Nonsense. We are wronged, all of us. The Empire shall feel the wrath of Scimitar. Oh, we are only too happy to agree. What to do with free time?
Lording it over the working class.
We'll give it our best.
They never gave me opportunity to show who I was. It's on your head.
On our way.
I always thought of China as a global superpower, an economic might, a threat to America's dominance. What I was about to find out would change everything.
China's population is currently 1.4 billion people, but that's projected to shrink by nearly half by the end of the century.
The number of migrants arriving at the southern border is unprecedented. So what's the fastest growing group among them? Chinese migrants. Yes, you heard that right, Chinese.
The more I began to study China, the more I saw a country completely different to the one normally portrayed. The question though, is this really the next superpower, like they claim, or more like a nation right on the verge of total collapse?
We are looking at the end of China as a political entity within a decade or two, and an economic entity within a decade.
Now we have a situation in the case of China where the economy is likely to be 2, perhaps 3 times larger than that of the US. So imagine you're the biggest gun on the block for as long as anyone can remember, and suddenly a kid comes along who's twice your size. And the foundation of war is economics.
China is clearly past its peak. The growth rate is going to come down pretty rapidly.
He's just terrifying to me because he murders dissidents, he murders anybody that... 巩固和增强经济回升向好态势，实现。
President Xi has called for the mass production of humanoids by 2025. He has laid out a long-term goal of surpassing the West in technology.
With China on a mission to reclaim what it sees as its rightful position, center of the world.
It's not a good idea to bet against the Chinese people.
Because they are going away. They're going away this decade, for certain.
To answer this question, we need to go to the country of Japan. Japan? Yes. Japan was once similar to the way China is today. In 1980, they were the second largest economy in the world. They were at the forefront of technology innovation. Tokyo was a major financial center, real estate was booming, and everyone felt rich. What the people of Japan didn't know was they were about to experience a crippling era of deflation and a brutal economic collapse. A long collapse. A period we now infamously know as Japan's lost decade.
Oh, the Japanese collapse was one of the worst economic periods the world has ever seen. Even today, Japan has never fully recovered.
China currently have all of the characteristics that Japan had, and then you see they've just touched into deflation. Their real estate market is standing on one leg. Their population, thanks to the one-child policy, are not exactly spring chickens anymore. You start to see why Ray Dalio has warned, China, if you don't play your cards right, the lost decade is next to yours to experience.
China is in a very difficult situation, and the geopolitical issues are important, and the capital issues are important.
Dalio said on LinkedIn that President Xi believes that there is a 100-year storm on the horizon. That assessment seems right to me.
But hang on, then why are we getting other economists saying don't be worried about China crashing, be worried about something completely different?
Economists are predicting that by 2033, China will be the largest superpower in the world. China's economy is very strong, and they're world champion in actually making products better, faster, and cheaper.
You see, like, how many smart, hardworking people are there in China? There's far more there than are here.
You can have a bet. $2 million in 20 years. China will overtake the US.
You see, the Chinese are by no means stupid. In 2013, the CCP started building their plan to dominate global trade. This includes a railroad connecting China all the way to London, gas pipelines from the Caspian Sea to Xinjiang, high-speed train networks in Southeast Asia, seaports dotted throughout the maritime Silk Road in different countries, but owned and built by China. If you study history, then you would know about China and the ancient Silk Road, the way they used it to export silk and grow into a dynasty. But what if China wanted to restore this ancient road to its former glory? I'm not Alex Jones, and this is no conspiracy theory. That's exactly what China are working towards. And when you see what they are capable of developing, you see this is not a pipe dream at all.
The Chinese government has been making big investments into robotics. This has helped them become the largest industrial robot producer in the world. It includes this humanoid robots, which the Chinese want to help care for their aging population. This robot, which can make coffee and interact with people, and a robo-dog, which
can bark, give a paw, amusingly stomp and spin in place, and even play music.
China's engineering and manufacturing capabilities blows my mind every time I read about it. Take, for example, this town in Tianjin. If you didn't know better, you would think this is Paris. It's got the Eiffel Tower, French-style ornaments, French-style buildings, except it's not Paris. It's 14,000 k's away from France, built on the east coast of China. They just like the design of the French capital, so as you do, you just put it in your home country.
There's something about being in a place that's your home that somebody copied and pasted.
Or if you look at Tianjin, China, you might think that you're in downtown Manhattan. It's got the Twin Towers, it's got the Rockefeller Center, it's even got the Hudson River. Except this is not the USA. Once again, you're in China. If the Chinese want to build something, they can do it. But there's one thing rather unique about these two cities. You start to read about them, and you find out that they're ghost cities, built to accommodate millions of people, but apparently the people just never came. Brilliant manufacturing, brilliant design, brilliant architecture, except they're missing the most important ingredient that a city needs. And it's not just these two ghost cities. Dotted throughout the landscape, studies have identified 50 of these in China with 50 million vacant units.
All of them were bizarre. There's no other way to describe just a city meant for thousands of people that's just completely empty.
I mean, it's something that's kind of like a nightmare, like a dystopian movie of the future, and you just wake up and all the people are gone, and it's just you and these like empty, husk of, buildings everywhere.
And as Yes Theory found out, the media slightly exaggerated how ghostly some of these cities really were. They do have people in them, but certainly nowhere near the amount a typical city would have. So how did China get things so drastically wrong, dedicating billions in resources to build entire cities that are, yes, impressive, yet in a way useless? Well, to answer that, you need to understand how China's system is designed. This country is run very differently to the United States. In China, it is not the power of the people that matter. It's not the power of the free market to wholly determine where money flows. The power lies in the hands of one party, the CCP, and in particular, one man, Xi Jinping. And recently, something happened with him that we've never seen before.
China's Communist Party has appointed President Xi Jinping to an unprecedented third term as leader.
The fact that it's his third is historic.
Evidence that he has now amassed more power than any Chinese leader since Mao Zedong. In the closing chapters of the party Congress, 2 aides apparently removed Xi's predecessor from the front row of dignitaries. Was he unwell, or was it a political purge?
If anyone had hopes on a balance of power, it seems like Xi had a different plan. Any billionaires that thought they had some sort of control would soon think again. In October 2020, one of China's richest men, Jack Ma, criticized those in power. He said that they had a pawn shop mentality with regards to their governance. 1 month later, Ma mysteriously disappeared from public view, and with his company and financial, something odd happened.
Welcome back. I want to share some very big news that has been developing this morning.
China's fintech giant Ant Group was on pace to break IPO records. In a dramatic turnaround, Chinese regulators brought the IPO plans to a halt.
Jack Ma's Ant Group IPO has been completely cancelled.
And then Ma would go missing from China for some years, later to return, yet not as a businessman, but a teacher. Communism was killing the golden goose, and the rich and wealthy were firmly put in their place. But it wasn't just the people at the top who got put in line. Any regular Joe who did something that the Communist Party disagreed with got put in their place.
If a traffic camera catches you jaywalking in China, it will convict you of jaywalking and take money out of your bank account with no intermediating judiciary at all, and show a picture of you to the people in the neighborhood so they know that you have jaywalked, and reduce your social credit score. And if your social credit score falls below a certain level, you can't buy drinks from a vending machine, you can't play video games, you can't go on a train, you can't get out of your 15-minute city. All that's already in place in China.
Do you think that that would be helpful or unhelpful?
I think it'll bring in a totalitarian tyranny so 100% complete that it would make George Orwell's 1984 look like a picnic.
When you see everything happening, it doesn't surprise me why so many Chinese are fleeing to America. I would too. But if you thought that this was the worst problem that China is facing, well, what if I told you that it wasn't? Thanks to the insane policies that communism brought, the most important part to China may be on the verge of something never seen before.
China's leaders are trying to find ways to battle what many economists have described as a demographic ticking time bomb.
China is expected to see a population crash of biblical proportions, like nothing the human race has ever witnessed before.
The population problem is going to be facing huge challenge. 1.4 billion people in China sounds a lot, but I think next 20 years we'll see this thing will bring big trouble to China. The speed of population decreasing is going to speed up. And you call it collapse.
Accelerating class. Accelerating class.
To understand what's happening, we need to rewind 40 years. In 1980, China was worried. They were worried that population growth was getting out of hand. And the CCP's concern was that with too many people, they would consume all of China's resources.
Mao was concerned that as the country was modernizing, the birth rate wasn't dropping fast enough and that the young generation was literally going to eat the country alive.
But this problem could easily be solved. China has no democracy, they have communism. With communism, the CCP has absolute power. And with absolute power, the population problem was going to be easily sorted. In the 80s, the CCP introduced a new policy, the one-child policy, where couples could have a maximum of one child. And this policy was ensured in a rather brutal manner.
40 years ago, birth control operations such as sterilization, abortions, and IUD insertions began to dramatically increase. Around 1983, China sterilized nearly 20 million and induced nearly 15 million abortions.
Cruel, but it worked. The population growth rates began to fall. The only problem is that it worked almost too well. 40 years down the line, and China has a replacement rate of 1.15 births per woman. Science says to maintain a population, that number should be 2.1. Because of this, China has now been hit with what's known as the infamous death cross. This is where you switch from having more births than deaths to more deaths than births. And what's concerning is that since the death cross, things have only gotten worse. We've seen even less people having babies and more people dying. Sad, but it might be that China end up learning the hard way that if you enforce extreme policies, you end up getting extreme results.
With only one child being allowed, sadly, the Chinese prioritized one gender over the other. Parents would often do what they could to ensure that their child was male. This gender is considered to be the primary breadwinners. They're considered to take care of their parents when they're older. The female generally marries into a different family.
This has obviously left Chinese demographics horribly skewed. You have many men with few females.
Because of one-child policy, a lot of girls got aborted in China, so they kept the boys. Now,
so there's many men that have no chance of ever finding a woman because there are no women.
Yeah, over 30 million men in the rural areas cannot find wives.
On top of this, you have healthcare technology improving, so old people are getting older, but you have few young people to look after those old people. This means not only do you have a population that is collapsing, it's collapsing in such a manner with few youth, many elderly, and little amounts of women. The ancient Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times, may be hitting China a little too close to home. So this leaves President Xi with a dilemma. How do we fix everything? Well, the answer might be something very simple. Revert back to the system that dug your people out of poverty and into a superpower, and just maybe avoid the system that killed 80 million in the days of President Mao.
If they don't address these issues pronto, their major attraction may turn from the Great Wall of China to something more like the Great Fall of China.
I'm so invincible, don't gotta convince them all. Yeah, you already know it's
on our way.
Halt the conveyor!
I feel it reflects the times. Boot doesn't, indeed taste half as bad as they say. But you can't just... I mean, you can't leave it unedited, of course.
Oh, we are only too happy to agree.
New orders? Sales! On our way. Coordinates plotted.
Pull up your braces and buckaroo!
It is folly.
No, you pig crap.
Contractors, are you covered? Insurance policies start at only $19.
On a day known as Liberation Day, President Donald Trump just dropped a bomb.
Carnage on Wall Street. Markets falling, tumbling.
Stocks plunging down, down, down. The Nasdaq's getting crushed. Small caps are getting crushed. This is a shock to the system.
It is ugly out there. Worse than worst case scenario. Stocks are getting slashed and burned. $2.5 trillion vaporized.
It is estimated that the average American family will pay more than $5,000 out of their pocket to pay for these tariffs.
Economic tariffs on the entire world. The U.S. officially launched one of the most aggressive trade policies in modern history, putting a 10% tariff on all imports across the board. China got hit with 34%, Vietnam 46%, even the European Union is facing a 20% tariff. Now the message is clear. America wants to bring production home, secure its supply chains, and assert its dominance. Now, the people who support this say this is needed to protect national security and rebuild American industries. But critics argue that we should get ready to pay higher prices, trade wars, and global economic fallout. But there might also be a twist ending to this story. Now these tariffs could be deflationary, that could cause the U.S. economy to slow down enough to force the Fed to lower interest rates and rescue the economy, which would allow the U.S. to refinance its debt and send the markets to the moon. Now, all of this sounds kind of crazy. There's a lot of fear and confusion out there, and I want to help explain how this will reshape everything from your portfolio to the future of the global monetary system. So here's what's going on and how this will affect you. Let's get into it. Hi, my name is Andre Jack. Hope you're doing well. Come for the finance and stay for the global reset. So we're back to tariffs again. So let me start by explaining what just happened, why it happened, the criticism for all of it, because there's a lot of good reasons to criticize it, and then I want to look at some of the theories of what could happen in the future. So first, here's what just happened. As of the day after the announcement of Liberation Day and all the tariffs were announced, the stock market was down about 10% from its peak, which is known as a correction. Now, this is interesting because just a couple of weeks ago, the story was the complete opposite. Markets were really excited, and they were hoping for an economic soft landing, meaning people were hoping the economy would not go into a recession, but now it looks like we just might. And it's not just stocks. There's all kinds of stress in the system right now, including the credit markets, corporate bond spreads widening, currency fluctuations for trade-sensitive economies. For example, currencies of export-driven countries like the Mexican peso, the Canadian dollar, and the Chinese yuan weakened because they're expecting things to get a lot worse. That's because whatever the US does, it's going to be felt by the entire world. So right now, Wall Street's response is fear. There's layoff announcements that have started trickling in from companies hit by higher import costs. Business groups are spending a ton of money to get some kind of an exemption or to make Mr. Trump roll back the policy completely. But no one knows where all of this is going, and when the stock market doesn't know and there's uncertainty, it can't predict the future, so it becomes a roller coaster. So that's what's happening. But the next question is, why is it happening? And this all happened because of how extreme these tariffs are. And to be fair, the critics have a really strong argument against how these tariffs were created. So let me explain. The administration told us that these tariffs were reciprocal, meaning they mirrored what other countries charged the US for imports. Whatever they charge us, we charge them the same.
Reciprocal tariffs on countries throughout the world. Reciprocal. That means they do it to us and we do it to them.
They also claimed the tariffs were then cut by half because we're nice. But that's not true. These tariffs are actually a lot higher than what other countries charge the US. For example, China's average tariff on US goods isn't 67%. It's closer to between 6 to 10%. Vietnam faces 46%, but its tariffs on US goods are much lower. Tariffs on Australia are now 10%, but Australian tariffs on US goods is 0. They are not reciprocal. In fact, if you look at the world average before these tariffs, the US charged the world about 2.5%, and the world charged the US about 5 to 10%. So yes, it was unfair to the US. But these new tariffs are between 10 to 50%, which dwarf those rates. So the question is, why is the US going to charge the world so much more, and how did they pick these numbers? And it turns out, someone figured out a formula that comes really close to how this was decided. The formula was based on a trade deficit with each country rather than directly matching the tariffs. So here's how it works. They took the trade deficit the US has with a country and divided it by the country's exports to the US, and then have the result for niceness. For example, the US trade deficit with China in 2024 was $294.4 billion, and imports from China were $439.9 billion. So step 1, trade deficit equals $295.4 billion. Step 2, $295.4 billion divided by $439.9 billion equals 67%. Step 3, 67% divided by 2 equals 33.5, so round up, which is how we got to 34%. A 34% tariff was applied to Chinese goods. Now, this formula was actually used for a lot of the countries listed, so let's look at another one. The US has a $17.9 billion trade deficit with Indonesia. Its exports to the US are $28 billion. So 17.9 divided by 28 equals 64%, which we are told is what Indonesia charges us. And because we're nice, we'll charge them half, 32%, half of 64. In reality, the number Indonesia charges the US is not 64% and never was. What it actually is about 8.1% on average. But it's certainly not 32% and it's nowhere near 64%. Here's the rest of the countries if you want to pause and do the math yourself. But wait, it gets even worse. Because these numbers were purely based on goods, and the math completely ignored what are called the services section of an economy, which are things like tourism, education, financial services, and that's where the US actually has a trade surplus. In other words, we export more of that stuff than we import, and that should have been considered in the tariff calculation, but they were not. So what this means is that the US will now charge the world anywhere from 10 to 50% more for its products, and some countries even more on top of that for certain industries. So ultimately then, what does this all mean, and what's going to happen next? So most people will fall in one of two camps. The latter camp being, Trump is so dumb he doesn't understand economics. So that's one of them. But the second camp says, maybe there's more to this than meets the eye. So let's take a look at some history and what other people have said about this concept of charging other countries more money for our products. You might be surprised to see who the critics are.
Look, I think the president's doing the right thing. China has been taking advantage of us for two decades. They're stealing our intellectual property, which means stealing our good-paying jobs.
How far does China have to go? How much more repression, how big a trade deficit and loss of jobs to the American worker, and how much more dangerous proliferation has to exist before members of this House of Representatives will say, I will not endorse the status quo. The lack of market access, the rip-off of our intellectual property, the transfer of technology, a country that is not willing to play by the rules in any respect in this trade relationship, you have a serious threat not only to our relationship, but to the industrialized world.
Further, what they have said is that we need to not worry about manufacturing in America.